Sports is what we do. It's the fast track at peak speed, moving across the ice, blockers, hitters, B-team, beatdowns, and knockouts, doubleheaders, playoffs, touchdowns, smackdowns, on the mat or on the track. The spirit of a champion. The triple-double. Make that double front flip. This is what we do.
Welcome back to NBusiness with Terrell Shepard. Back on the other side, as I said, I have my lovely guest, wGeena Young, who's here, the managing partner for NexxTOne Sports and Management. How you doing, WGeena?
I'm great, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. Well, our show today is going to be talking about all things sports and all things business, of course. So I decided to have you come on, being an expert in the area of sports management, and particularly in the area of financials. Give our audience a little bit of background about wGeena Young and even how you got to this whole idea of sports management. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions that are even going to get to that point, but go right ahead.
Okay, well, thank you. So pleased to be here. Again, my name is wGeena Young. I'm the managing partner of NexxTOne Sports and Entertainment Management, a minority woman-owned, predominantly owned sports and management firm. My background is accounting and finance, have been in the accounting arena for over 20 years, and came to the idea of NexxTOne by having conversations with a cousin of mine who's worked for the NFL for a number of years, talking about the lack of qualified experts to assist professional athletes and entertainers in the management of their life outside of the football field or the basketball court or the concert stage. And so had a vision to really start a firm that could really help bring experts together to really help professional athletes and entertainers make wise decisions when it comes to investments and business decisions, so that their money can last them as long as possible, and just to make their life easier while they're focusing on their expertise.
Fantastic. And so with that being said, of course, I was talking about, as I started my show, as you heard, talking about the Adrian Peterson situation.
Yes.
And the opportunity. And again, this is not an unusual story, but it is a story that comes up, of course, here in the Washington, D.C. area, playing for the Washington Redskins. And what I love oftentimes focus on, and we know that we focus on a lot of times the stories that deal with the whole idea of, athletes entrusting their money to the wrong people. Which is, no doubt an issue.
Yes.
In the world of, but I would say that's not an issue for athletes. That's an issue for business people. That's an issue for doctors. That's an issue for, any number of wealthy people. But for the sake of the conversation, athletes as well.
Correct.
You have worked with a number of businesses and small business owners and opportunities to work with a number of different people. So I'm sure you've seen this scenario play out. One of the conversations is, I think, with athletes, having worked with athletes myself, that although athletes are unique in the aspect of what they do and the type of capital that they bring at one time, do we find that more athletes or more individuals, let's say high net worth, and we can maybe throw athletes there, have a tendency to want to do things on their own versus listening to maybe advisors? I'm not saying that advisors are all good, but based on the advisors that some have you found it where they might be a challenge of listening to you as an advisor, as somebody who's now in the sports and management and entertainment world?
Absolutely. And we find that there are folks from all persuasions, all professional backgrounds. Some want to listen, others don't. And I find that oftentimes those who choose not to listen to great advice come back at some later time when their backs are against the wall, or they realize they've made some not so good decisions, and so they need some help kind of digging out of a hole that they've gotten themselves into.
And oftentimes, do we also think that normally when we're talking about advice and advisors, we have to realize that, when you're talking about an athlete, or when you're talking about, again, a high net worth individual, anyone that you're speaking of, normally these individuals have more than one advisor.
Absolutely.
Which you say that normally is, so it's normally not like, this is although it's the sports, normally the agent, I'm presuming, in most cases that I've listened to and talked to, obviously your background in finance. would you now, and your business is going to be more sports agency or more accounting? How's your business going to kind
So it's not going to be the sports agents. We know the sports agents are those professionals who typically negotiate contracts for athletes, for example, since we'll just talk about athletes. The managers, which we'll be managing their life outside of that. So basically, what happens after the contract has been negotiated, after the contract has been signed, then what?
Okay.
How do I make wise decisions? I want to, take some of my earnings and purchase a Chick-fil-A franchise.
Right.
We will help them with our legal team to make wise decisions. Is that a good choice? Maybe a McDonald's is a better model for you than a Chick-fil-A. We'll work with our experts on the investment advisor side to look at what good investments are out there that make sense for that person, because what makes sense for me may not make sense for you. In addition, just really helping these athletes and entertainers with what we call financial literacy, for lack of a better term, helping them to budget. So, because no matter whether you're making $20,000 a year or $20 million a year, you should have a budget or some guidelines to help you to make decisions on how you're going to spend, what bills you need to pay, and that sort of thing.
That's an excellent point. And I think that this is where the conversation kind of comes in, because normally at a person making, as we just talked about Ezekiel Elliott over the weekend, he just signed a 6-year contract. Actually now it's going to be 8 years, but he basically signed a 6-year contract. An incredible amount of money.
Yes.
Obviously $50 million when you're talking about guaranteed money. I mean, obviously that's enough money for maybe not everybody.
Yeah.
Not me, of course, but I'm speaking of, for the average person, it's enough money to last them for a lifetime.
Absolutely.
Some people need 52, 53 million, but clearly $50 million works for a lifetime and beyond, right? We would just think that if someone in their 24, 25, whatever, they're making $50 million by the time they're 30 years old.
Yeah.
I mean, you would think that's enough money forever and another lifetime.
Right.
But we see oftentimes these situations come into play where, money is not there, things are not happening, so forth and so on.
Yeah.
And what I've always said is not so much that people take your money. That does happen. But you just brought out a point where I think management becomes so significant and important, because it's not so much me not advising you on the right money necessarily, where to put it and so forth and so on. I do believe that budgeting is critical. I think that, first of all, everyone needs to have a budget.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
So if you got a $50 million, and then what does that budget, what does it look like? Like, what does it mean? What's the roadmap? Because if I'm making, $10,000 a month and you're making $1 million a month, then your lifestyle is going to be $1 million or $12 million or whatever it's going to be annually.
Yeah.
Whatever that looks like for you. And that's going to look different for everyone else.
Exactly.
And I think that's where management kind of comes in. The question is not, am I going to live a $12 million lifestyle? The question is, how does a $12 million lifestyle look?
And also, to add to your point, very good point, but also these athletes have to remember that their lifespan in football or basketball is a short window of time. So what happens, God forbid, you get hurt? Or what happens when you retire? What happens to that money? You want to make the best use and make choices about your money so that money can last you a lifetime, so it can last you as long as possible. And I was telling someone or sharing with someone the other day a statistic that I read, and this is from statistics from 2015. So now we're almost in 2020. Right. Kind of tells you the time span. The statistic indicated that 78% of retired NFL players have to file bankruptcy within 2 to 5 years after retirement.
Correct. Yes.
So you talk about someone who may not have made the best choices, or anything could have happened.
Yes.
And so for some reason, if they're not careful with their money, what happens? They have to file for bankruptcy.
And I think you make a great point, and matter of fact, that stat has come out. We talked about it even earlier in the show. When you're talking about the 78% of all NFL players, and it's because, again, NFL players, don't have guaranteed contracts, because NFL players have some different components. And oftentimes, as we talk about, what we're going to see in the mega contracts, the quarterbacks who normally get these, the Kirk Cousins, the Aaron Rodgers, the Russell Wilsons of the world, all these guys, the Carson Wentz just got a mega contract. Normally, these individuals actually have enough. I call it, you have so much money that you're outside of the bounds of traditional even thinking. Like you can theoretically lose, if you just think about it in a context. You could lose 20 to 30% of your money if you had $50 million and still live the rest of your life.
Oh yeah.
Right? You can lose, you can lose $15 million. You got a bad deal. You lost $15 million.
Yeah.
You could theoretically live the rest of your life. The problem is not people with the mega contract. This is really what I always tell people.
Right.
The problem is the majority of NFL players do not have mega contracts.
Absolutely.
The majority of them have minimum contracts.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you're in a minimum contract environment or just above minimum, people forget. For an example, I give a perfect example. Dak Prescott is coming up on his contract. I was looking at this yesterday. So Dak Prescott has been in the league for 3 years.
Yep.
He made $400,000 his first year. He made, I think, $554,000 his second year. Last year, Dak Prescott, who took the team to the NFC East division, won the NFC East division, made $630 something thousand. So in his whole career so far, he's made $2 million.
Yep.
Well, this year, if he renegotiates his contract, it's going to be like something crazy, like 30 something million a year.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So he's going to go from 600,000 to, it's like the lottery.
Yeah.
He's going to go to like 30 something million dollars in a matter of months.
Absolutely.
Like the lottery. Now, we know lottery winners.
Yep.
So I'm using that as an example. Lottery winners have the exact same fail rate as NFL players.
Absolutely.
70% of all lottery winners go bankrupt in 5 years.
Yeah.
So the reality of it is you get all of this money at a certain time frame. And what I tell people is, and I'm sure you have, your lifestyle shifts to the money that you now have.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And the question really comes in, which most time people don't talk about. Most people say this: the person goes from $600,000 to $30 million, and let's say they blow the money, and most people say, "Oh, it was just crazy. Made all these bad decisions. The investors, the advisors took all this money." When in fact, going from 600,000 or 100,000 or zero to millions of dollars, there are multiple management conversations and lifestyle management things that take place that you might not even be thinking about.
That's true.
Like if I all of a sudden make $30 million, we're all praying for that actually here. We're actually part of the WBGR family. We're all looking for that. They're working for that for me for that. So when that happens, I know that there will be a lifestyle change that I have to make, right? You can't think that somebody who's making $600,000 is going to have the same lifestyle as $30 million.
Oh, absolutely not.
And what happens, I believe, to the majority of NFL players, because the time frame is so short.
Yeah.
NFL players probably, unlike other, not saying that others don't, but they probably have more pressure to realize that they need to do something outside of the NFL to sustain.
Absolutely.
Because if you look at somebody coming from zero to, let's say, $500,000.
Yeah.
Right? And while that might not seem like a lot to some people, that's significant.
Absolutely.
I mean, you figure 500,000. Most people in the country, most people in the United States of America don't make $500,000.
Right.
Right? 7% of all people make six figures.
Right.
So most people ain't making $500,000.
That's true.
So the average young person that's making if you just stop there, that is significant.
It is. It is.
And if they're only going to do that for 3 years, their lifestyle has to be adjusted in such a way that for 3 years I'm going to do something so that I can live the rest of my life another kind of way.
And that's it.
And that's and I bring all out to say, although we talk about it on radio, we talk about it on Facebook, we talk about it in the news, we think, because we can see it in professionals, that's pretty easy. That's an extremely difficult thing to do.
Yes, it is.
Which is why a management company is needed, huh?
Absolutely. Exactly.
Which is why a management company is needed. Because that's a hard thing. I mean, you give anybody $30 million. You give me $30 million today, and I'd probably spend 28. And I've been in finance for 28 years. I'd be like, you know what? I can probably get away with spending $28 million. I'll find ways to do it. I mean, I'll get very creative. Don't worry. I'll let my management team know. I'll be a terrible client. I would be terrible. I would be terrible.
That's a hard shift. I mean, it's a mindset shift.
Yes.
It's a paradigm shift. All those things play.
All of a sudden, you've been living in, even if you were middle class, you were living in a middle class environment, and you're telling me the realtors out here in Great Falls or wherever showing you $1 million, $2, $3 million house. They're like, oh yeah, you can afford that. You can just write a check. And the average person is thinking, my family for the first time can have maids and drivers or whatever. They can live the lifestyle. For the first time, I can have the opportunity to go where I want to go, when I want to go, how I want to go. For the first time, so you have to, I tell people there is a scripture in the Bible that says, Paul says, I've learned how to abase and I've learned how to abound. I've always understood, abase, I've learned how to live with little. Most people can adjust to living with little. That's true. We talk about our parents and our grandparents, they'll tell you, we were outside in the outhouse or whatever. We had to, we walked to school with no shoes, whatever. You know what I'm saying? You learn how to live with a little bit and you can kind of adjust your life, I believe, to living. Let me just say it this way. And believe me, I am not a proponent of poverty. What I'm saying is you can adjust if you are in poverty to live in a poverty in that context because you don't have the options.
That's true.
Would that be true?
Absolutely.
You don't have options. Like if I know I'm going to make XYZ dollar, this is all I can afford. I'm probably more inclined from a life management standpoint. My life is kind of managed by my limitations.
Absolutely.
It's managed by my limitations. 301-429-9247 if you all want to get on the conversation. It's poverty can limit if your lifestyle becomes managed by your limitations. The good thing about that is I'm limited to what I could get,
versus what in your mind having that unlimited or that limitless mindset, because you got the money, but then just think about, you get a bonus on your job, a Christmas bonus, so you get 10,000. That sounds like a lot of money, but by the time they take out taxes, that number has dropped, and by the time you get that money in your hand, it goes like that. If you're not careful, and so it's the same concept.
The exact same concept. That's an excellent concept,
and it goes so quickly. Paying maids and drivers and taking your family on trips. Before you know it, you spent like $100,000.
Exactly, and I think this is where. And when we say to athletes, and I'm sticking with football specifically, but entertainers is the same thing.
It doesn't matter.
When we say to them, you have mismanaged your money, what I normally come back to conclude, and maybe this will kind of go right into the business where what you've started. I don't know if it's a mismanagement of money as much as it could be a mismanagement of lifestyle.
Absolutely. I agree with that.
Would that be more?
I agree with that.
Yeah, because I mean, you can mismanage somebody's. I get the mismanagement of money. That's what I haven't been in the financial services industry for a long time, 20 plus years. The mismanagement of money is a misnomer in this concept. It's not like you have a bunch of people that are just running around that are just incredibly irresponsible. They're like, okay, I know I can't afford a Ferrari. Let me just go to the Ferrari dealership and buy one. Normally what happens is I call it the docking effect of a boat. If you notice, if you tie a boat to a dock and you leave it there, the current will pull the boat out, but as long as it's tied in, it'll eventually it'll get to a limit, and it'll stop. But if you unloose the boat or at your dock and you just let the boat be there and you come back tomorrow, or the next day, the boat's in the middle of it's in the middle of the pond. You're like, the boat's in the middle of the pond. That's what happens when you have no limitations.
Absolutely.
And so I think that the challenge with athletes, with anybody who is wealthy, is how do you put, I said all that to say, how do you really put limitations on
Absolutely.
wealthy people?
Parameters. Just put
Parameters.
parameters in place. So you
I mean, we can give them guidelines, but how do you really
Yeah.
put because if I have $30 million in my mind, I can spend and be right.
Yeah.
I could spend $5 million. I mean, $7 million. I don't see where that would be, if I got 30. So how do you put parameters on people?
Yeah.
So that's a question I'm asking you. How would you put, what an idea would you use to put a parameter on somebody?
That's a good question.
Because I'd be the worst person that you
Yeah.
can put parameters. I can just tell you that right now. But go ahead, give it a shot.
No, and so there are a number of different ways that you
Tell
can
me
do
I'm going to jail. That would help.
No, right. That would definitely.
I would then stop. But outside of that.
That would help. That would help. So there are a number of different ways you can put parameters in place. And again, kind of going back to that word, that B word that people don't like to use, budget.
Okay.
Guidelines. Oftentimes athletes, entertainers come into all this money, and then they're like, "Hey, you're my manager. You're my whomever.
Right.
Take care of my money. Pay my bills. I'm going over here." The key. And one of the philosophies that we're using at NexxtOne is that we want our clients to keep their eye on their money. Know
Okay.
where your money is at all times. You don't have to be the one to do everything. You don't have to be the one to write the checks or pay the bills, but at least know where it is.
Yes.
Versus relying on someone else to tell you where it is, and then you come back to, you ready to retire in 5 years, and it's like, oh my God, like I'm missing like $50 million. What happened?
Right.
Because you took your eye off of your money.
That's a good
that's
point.
no different than, us paupers, us that are not at 30 million a year,
Right.
and I tell clients on the accounting side, on my accounting business, the same thing. They want to push it. Just take everything. Take the checkbook. Take everything. That's not the way you do it. To manage your business, and athletes and entertainers are a brand. They're a business.
Yes.
They're a business, right? So it's no different. You
Okay.
have to know where your money is.
So what you do, which I think is interesting in the concept, and we're going to talk about this on the other side, but I like this. What you're basically saying is that part of what you do is you put the onus on the athlete.
Absolutely.
Put it on
and
the
it's to
brand.
educate them. It's to engage them
right,
so they
okay.
understand, because they need to understand. Just because you're going from college making zero money to making 30 million a year, you are now a business enterprise. So you have to act like a boss, like a business enterprise. So we will help them and guide them, and we'll be there to support them every step of the way. But we want to engage them. We want to get them involved in there, because it's their future at the end of the day.
Fantastic. Back on the other side of NBusiness with Terrell Shepard again, and with wGeena Young, managing partner for NexxtOne. We are talking again, not only all things sports and all things business, but we're talking about this all important area of money management as it relates to athletes, and as it relates to what's taking place with athletes. And of course, we brought out, what took place with not only a top athlete like an Adrian Peterson, but with athletes all over the country. It's not, Terrell Owens bought this out. Dez Bryant bought this out. I mean, I can go down the list of athletes, who have gone down this road and who've had to, go through these aspects of how they make lists. So it's not a knock indication. It's that aspect of, and I think management is so important. Back on the other side of NBusiness with Terrell Shepard, we'll finish up our conversation with wGeena Young, managing partner of NexxtOne.
Thank you.